What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Corporate Bartender. Navigating a career keeps getting harder and harder. It's a lot of work, and we've got to be ready for the twists, turns, and inevitable burnout that comes with it. That's what we're talking about today. We've got Johanna Danaher on the program. If you don't know Johanna, stick around. We've got you covered. She was a wannabe marine biologist, bartender, gig worker, and an HR lifer. She's been there, done that, and got the t-shirts. This conversation was fantastic, and I know you're going to dig it. You'll learn about lobsters, burnout, and the drink called the Johanna. Buckle up, TCBers, grab your favorite cocktail, and let's get right on into it with Johanna Danaher on today's TCB.
Welcome to Sky Team's The Corporate Bartender, where we gather some of the best HR and people leaders to discuss what's happening on the people side of business. Join the bartenders, Eric and Lori, as they interview some of today's most innovative thinkers, share tips, tricks, and tools, while enjoying some good old-fashioned community and, as always, laughing a lot. Now pull up a stool, belly up to the bar, and join us for the Corporate Bartender.
Welcome, everybody. It is Wednesday, and you know what that means. It is your favorite day and mine. It is Corporate Bartender Day. It is the 1st of April, 2026. It was all I could do to not pull pranks through this whole show, but I vowed no April Fool's jokes, because if anybody has scrolled any sort of social media feed today, you can't tell. You assume everything's a joke, and the world is so messed up right now. Some of that shit's true. It's not a joke. So I have been staying away from socials, and I have made a vow to not prank anybody on the show today. So I thought, Johanna's a guest. It's April Fool's Day. You got to roll the dice on some of those things. But this is the 238th time that we've convened this group of awesome people, and I'm so stoked. Ever since we did the relaunch, we've had people that we haven't seen in so long. People like Chuck, people like Michelle, Catherine, Ann Mounts, who's going to be a guest bartender here this summer. So I know you're excited. I'm excited. But today we have a guest. Her name is Johanna Danaher, and she is the founder and chief energy officer of Anchor to Aspire. Before we get into that, I do just want to let people know, right? If you're listening, we're not doing the show every Wednesday anymore. We're doing it twice a month. And on the Monday of show weeks, Lori sends out an email that lets everybody know what we're doing, who we're talking to, and what we're talking about. So if you want to get on that list, just hit us up, let us know, and we'll make sure to get you on that list. I didn't warn her, but if she's watched or listened to any episode, she knows that we like to dance people onto the show. So let's give Johanna a warm TCB welcome, shall we? It's funny. I always keep the music going until the guest starts to dance, and it's always the middle-aged white dudes that hold out the longest. Sometimes they'll stare me down. And I'll be like, I got 6 minutes of this that I could just let go. And finally, at the end of that staring contest, maybe some hands come up, maybe we get a little chair dance, and then they want that to be over as quickly as possible. Johanna, thanks for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Eric. I'm so thrilled to be here.
So we like to start with an origin story, because, as we were talking about in the pre-show, I don't know nearly as many astronauts, firefighters, and cops and doctors as I did when I was 6. So tell us a little bit about what you wanted to be, what you started to be, and what you do now.
So I like to say I started in gig work before it was sexy. So actually, that was my first job out of college was bouncing around, really trying to figure out who I wanted to be when I grew up. And I really started studying marine biology. So that's what I went to college for. I wanted to be a dolphin trainer. I wanted to,
Oh,
be out on the water. I wanted to just really lean in on that. And I loved it. I worked in that field while I was in undergrad. I did a whole bunch of studies. I could tell you everything you want to know about a lobster. It was great. It was awesome. It was fabulous.
what's one
I hated
thing?
every minute of it.
What's one thing about a lobster that most people don't know?
So you can tell male or female lobsters just by flipping them over and looking at the underside and seeing the little flippers and be able to tell who's the boy, who's the girl.
You can do the same thing
And
with
they
humans, I
take
think.
8 years to even get to maturity. So
Oh,
before you even see one in the store, it's already been 8 to 10 years.
right on. All right,
And they
so
really like to migrate.
so you thought you wanted to be a marine biologist, you did all this stuff, and then I think you said you hated every minute of it.
Hated every minute of it.
Okay.
Yep.
First pivot, what happened then?
So then I decided I was going to change my degree and change my major while I was in college in my second to last semester. I was like, well, I don't want to do science anymore. And you typically are going after like a BS degree. So I went in and I said to my advisor, I said, I don't want to do this. I want to get some information. I want to be more in the comm space. And so I decided that I was going to get a Bachelor of Arts. I was the first and only person to get a BA degree in zoology because I added mass media and public
Oh,
relations to my list of things that I wanted to do. And I thought I was going to go into grant writing because I wanted to stay connected to science because that was important to me. But then I left and went back to my home in New York and started gig work. And I worked at a teleconference center. I did recruiting for Merrill Lynch. I did advertising for Partnership for a Drug-Free America. I did all sorts of wonderful things as a temp. And I was sort of bouncing around the city trying to figure out who I wanted to be. And I didn't like any of those either. So I went back to Maine and I ran a restaurant and then I ran a bookstore and then I became an actual bartender.
all right. Time out. Where in Maine?
Pemaquid, Maine, the mid coast.
So Lori's dad is from Falmouth Foreside, and we go to Maine. We used to go every summer, but we go all the time. So you had me at Maine.
I love it. Maine is the way life should be, right? Absolutely.
It's vacation land, according to their license plates.
100% true.
So you were tending bar in Pemaquid.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And I
we
was
have
working.
a question about that.
Yeah.
Michelle wants to
Ooh.
know, as a bartender, what was your favorite drink to make?
Oh gosh. So we actually called it the Johanna, which is really quite embarrassing, and they still sell it. So, but it was passion liqueur Passoa with orange juice and cranberry and a splash of soda.
So in Pemaquid, you can order a Johanna, and that's what you'll get.
Well, man, that was 35 years ago. So, but they do still sell it today. I don't know if they call it the Johanna anymore.
I love it. All right, so we're tending bar. Now what?
Then it was three jobs at a time. It was just not sustainable. I met my husband in the bar, and he was from Connecticut, and we moved to Connecticut. And then I decided that I would find something to do because
Like
I
a
had
real
no
job?
idea. Like, yeah, well. We'll say that. But I was like, yeah, I don't know what to do. So I went back to the temp agencies that I had been working for before. And, gig work was still an in thing. And I landed a job running university relations for Pfizer. And I spent the next 25 years, half of my life at Pfizer in HR.
Wow. Wow. So gig work to big complex company.
Yep.
What's the toughest shift?
I think it's the pace, right? And interestingly, I say it's the pace because in gig work, everything is fast and furious, right? You're going in to solve a very specific problem very, very quickly. But the pace of change was really the biggest for me. Once you were in an organization, I had very specific and clear goals, but everything was changing and everything was shifting. And many of you on the phone will know, like when I started, I was in recruiting and we were getting fax resumes, like, on the fax machine.
Yes.
Right? We didn't have an applicant tracking system. There was no such thing. It was an Excel spreadsheet called the Jerry spreadsheet because somebody named Jerry made it. Right? That's the reality of it. So
True.
it was different and we had to figure things out in a very different way. And then you fast forward 5, 10, 15 years. Now you have social media. Now you have people who are connected by nanoseconds. You know everything you could possibly know about someone just by looking at their social profile. So you think, right?
Right.
So it was just that sort of pace of change, and then being in a complex organization. Yeah, that was the biggest shift.
Wow. It's funny. Mariah was telling a story a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about recruiting and, how people used to send resumes in creative ways. She received one attached to a flip flop or a skateboard, it just made me think about, going out and buying the expensive 100-pound paper and trying, none of that matters anymore. None of it matters. And now watching
the ones that had perfume on them, right? Yeah, all of that.
And now watching videos of people that have their, they pull their phones out and stick them to their screen so AI can answer interview questions and they just have to read them. Or the flip side of candidates trying to prove that the person interviewing them is not an AI. And apparently you do that by asking it to hold 3 fingers over its face because it can't do that.
It can't do that.
It can do this, but it can't do this. And at least that's what they say. I should ask Josiah. He would probably know. Because he's young and not old like me. So 25 years in corporate HR, and now you're doing this coaching facilitation thing, and you started Anchor to Aspire. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so my role was eliminated about a year and a half ago. And at that moment, I had to really make a decision. Do I want to continue to be in the corporate environment? Do I want to continue to, work at the level that I was working at, or do I want to do something different? And to be honest, I probably knew I was ready for a pivot or a change and not doing something the same for about 2 years. I knew I wanted to move into this space. I'd been running executive coaching for the organization. I'd been doing career development and talent management. It was a passion area. But I wasn't willing to take the step to do it for myself until my role was eliminated and I got the push out of the nest. And that's an interesting thing because a lot of the clients I work with are people who are facing, career pivots, whether they have also, lost their roles because of a restructure or because they're being intentional about making a shift. And it wasn't until, as I said, that my company said, we love you, but we don't have a box for you. And
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, well, now what? So I just had to accelerate sort of what my plans were. And I really took a lot of time to reflect on who do I want to be now? Who do I want to be without my title? I still introduce myself as the HR leader as opposed to a solopreneur and a coach, right? I still am trying to learn who the heck am I, right? Who do I want to be? How do I want to talk? How do I want to present myself? Am I allowed to curse when I'm on a webinar, right?
Fuck
Those
yeah,
are
you're
all the
allowed to
things.
curse, especially here.
Absolutely. Oh shit. Yeah, okay, there we go.
There
I
it
tried
is.
it.
I'm going to give you
But
applause for that. That's nice work right there.
So I'm trying to find my voice, right? I was the voice of the company for so long. So how do you figure out who you want to be, and how do you take risks in a way when they're only your risks, right?
Yeah.
You're the accountable party at all times. So that's hard.
It is. It's scary, especially when you when you put that first foot on the boat and the other foot is still on the dock, that's pretty scary. This is my 14th year living that life. So I remember what that's like, and wouldn't change a thing. Clients ask all the time.
And that's good to hear.
Clients ask all the time, you should come do this here. And I'm like, why? Why on earth would I want to go to the same place every day and see the same people every day and get caught up in the politics of the thing and lose my objectivity and my perspective, right? I remember, and Lori still works in an organization, right? So like I hear about what it's like to work in an organization. This life isn't for everybody, but if it's for you, it's for you. So
yeah, that's so true.
In your HR career, like any good HR person, you picked up a lot of certifications for stuff and you learned how to do different things and you rolled out programs. And Anchored to Aspire is sort of centered in a lot of these neuroscience-based approaches to coaching, like energy leadership and positive intelligence, or PQ, and happiness science, and those sorts of things. Tell us a little bit about why that's important to you and why you gravitated toward the tools that you use now.
Yeah, so, energy really is the foundation of everything, right? And we all know those moments when we walk into a room and we're energized, we're ready to go, we are really passionate, and a leader walks in and that energy level changes, right? All of a sudden there's tension, all of a sudden there's you feel depleted, or on the flip side, you could be like, okay, we're ready to go, right? Yeah. And so I wanted to understand that a little bit more, and I wanted to understand, what's really happening from a physiology perspective, from a neuroscience perspective, when that's going on. And we rolled out some work at Pfizer with the Energy Project back in 2018 and actually brought them in to really look at the energy of the organization. What was happening with our people? How could we ensure that our people were energized, that they were engaged, that they were motivated, that they were, focused on work that matters? And what I found is as leaders, if we are not doing work that matters, if we are not aligning the work to our own value system, our people around us feel that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's important. First and foremost was really making sure that leaders could help their teams connect what they do every day to purpose and values. And then the other thing is about emotions, right? We were always told, check your emotions at the door, right? Emotions don't belong at work, which is bullshit, right? We all know that, right? And our emotions come with us, and how you manage your feelings, yours and others around you, is absolutely critical. And then the other thing that I noticed was that when we are operating from a sense of control, right? Many of us are high functioning, high potential performers, and we have this sense of high standards, but high standards can very, very easily turn into being over functioning and being a stickler for following things and doing them my way, as opposed to being open to others' ways of doing work and others' ways of thinking.
I love that. It reminded me of a thing that Lori says all the time. Leaders bring the weather, right? The weather of the organization, what it feels like to work there. We've talked a lot here, and it's in the press all the time now, about burnout. And I know that's a thing that you've thought about and use in your practice. Burnout is a common thing. It's kind of a catch-all term as well. How do you define that from your perspective, A, and B, like what are the baby steps that somebody can take if they feel like they're on the edge of burning out?
So burnout oftentimes is, thought about as something that happens sort of like far down the road. Like if I continue to work at this pace for these amounts of months, I'm going to burn out in a few months. I argue that burnout can happen at any point during any day, right? You can be working on something that completely de-energizes you. There's a trigger that comes in, and all of a sudden you're sort of like burnt out. You're like, I'm apathetic. I'm sort of operating from level 1 energy, right? I just don't even know where to start on a project. So burnout can happen to all of us any time of the day. It doesn't show up dramatically often, right? It can be the 3 a.m. wake ups the next day. It could be just that nagging fatigue, that restlessness, the sort of you're going through the motions, you're hitting your goals, but you're just not fulfilled, right? And that comes to life for high achievers, especially when they're sort of really looking successful on the outside, still hyper producing, but they feel empty inside. So it often hides behind productivity, right? We keep producing and we keep producing and we keep producing, but we are so drained when we get home at the end of the day. Right. So the instinct is to just push harder sometimes, to just kind of like, if I could just get through this, if I could just get through the next 3 months. I can tell you, I probably said that to myself 100 times. Right. I don't need a new planner. I needed an actual new pattern. Right. So the sort of idea that the root cause was never workload. It was either misalignment or I was being triggered by something and I wasn't recognizing that, and I wasn't taking a pause to really say, what's happening to me in this moment? Why am I feeling so de-energized? Why am I angry? Why am I showing up in this moment pissed off? And if I am showing up in this moment pissed off, I probably actually need to not go into that moment in this moment at this time.
So I'm gonna give you 25 points for the bullshit and the 2 pissed offs. So I appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about that though, right? This notion that I know that I'm running low, right? There's a law of diminishing returns. I know I'm not bringing my best game to work every day, even if I'm pushing through it, right? Even if I'm continuing to work hard, I'm not bringing my A game, right? And my quality is going to start to slip. But I can't take a mental health day. I can't do something to take care of myself, because taking care of yourself is selfish. At least that's what we're programmed to believe, some of us. So how do you help somebody get them to understand that taking care of yourself, like the flight attendant says, you got to put on your oxygen mask first before you can help anybody else. Get them to prioritize self-care in a world that doesn't.
Yeah. And we glorify busyness, right? I mean, that's been glorified for forever, constantly. So I talk a lot about, and I do an energy audit with my clients and an energy leadership index. And, I share my story. And I've taken this particular energy leadership index 3 times. Once was before my role was eliminated, once immediately after, and once more recently. And what I was able to show is my stress response was typically, 32% of my stress response was actually apathy, right? Just like throw my hands up in the air, I can't do anything about it, and I'm going to withdraw. The other 16% was anger, right? And so then the rest of it was, higher levels of energy where I would see opportunity in what was happening. But what I found was when I started to really look at my energy and where it was going, I reduced my stress response from 16.2% to 6.2% in anger. And really what I discovered was that what was happening is that I'm a people person. Many HR professionals are very people oriented. We want to help, right? That's why we went into this profestion. But
yet we all say, I'm an HR and I don't like people, ironically.
Yeah. we say that, but that's a lie, right? Again, also a lie. But, so we want to help, but when we help it and we don't actually help ourselves, then it becomes people pleasing, right? And that was happening to me. So what I was doing was I was saying yes to everything all the time because I wanted to make sure that I was helping, that I was pleasing the other. And I thought that I was really being helper, right? I was not. I was holding people back from doing their best work, and I was depleting myself.
Right.
So somebody said to me not too long ago, like, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? We've all heard that adage, and it's kind of overused. But they said you can't pour from a filling cup either. You can only pour from the overflow. And I was like, Holy shit, you're right. I can only pour from the overflow. I can't give anything if it's not overflowing. If I haven't filled myself up first, if I haven't
Yeah.
given to myself, I can't actually give to others. Because if I do give to others, then I'm going to end up getting angry, or I'm going to end up blaming somebody else because I haven't taken care of myself and it's somebody else's fault other than it being mine.
Yeah. Yeah. I wrestle with this one in trying to help people understand that self-care it matters, right? It matters with the highest of priorities, right? It's like getting people to understand that thinking time is actually working time. And if you're not planning for thinking time throughout your week, you're cutting yourself short, right? And you're leading into that self-fulfilling prophecy of burnout, right? You're going to continue to work hard and you're not thinking about how you could work smart. And the cycle repeats and repeats and your energy depletes and depletes over time. So if you get me to believe it, okay, I got to take care of myself and that's not, bullshit. What's my first step? How do I reset? Like, I don't know how to do this. I'm a driver, go-getter, disc D. I'm going to go out there and now I'm going to turn it on me and hold up the mirror and ask myself emotional questions. I don't think so. What am I going to do, Johanna?
Yeah, so the most important thing to be able to get back to performance zone once you've sort of been in survival and now you're burning out is to pause, is to get to renewal, is to actually stop. You have to stop. You have to try to stop fixing yourself to tolerate the grind. You have to actually create those micro shifts. And so I talk about protecting that 1 hour of focus time to give yourself that mental capacity to focus. Adding like a simple 5-minute morning ritual, right? To sort of reset. Or guess what? Maybe don't go back to back to back to back to back in the meetings. And when you're doing that, and if you're in an office, right, and you're running from one meeting location to another, don't check your email, right? Don't do that.
But don't I get some sort of award for that?
Oh, yeah. Clap,
if
clap,
I'm in
clap.
the most
Happy,
meetings
happy.
and get the most emails, I win some sort of award.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you do. You win the Burnout Award, right? Because you've just burned yourself out. So it's also like just making sure that instead of doing that, just do a breathing exercise. It sounds so sort of woo-woo, right? Many leaders don't like that. I'm like, but just sit with me for a minute and let's do it. And then they can automatically start to feel their heart rate change. They can feel calmer. They can feel like the stress is actually leaving their body simply because they took that simple 5-second, 10-second, 15-second pause.
I'm giving you the correct answer, Belle. What I love about what you just said, you said it sounds kind of woo-woo, and it does. Mm-hmm. And if you have real work to do, it sounds really woo-woo. But what happens when you do it isn't feelings. It isn't emotions. It's neuroscience. It is your body chemistry. It is changes that happen literally inside your body. It is trackable, traceable, scientific fact, right? This isn't me deciding that I want to hug a tree. This is me lowering my heart rate, putting more oxygen into my bloodstream, and reducing cortisol in my system, right? Like that's real stuff. And I find that because I work with a lot of technology companies and I work with a lot of people who started life not in marine biology, but as engineers. And engineers are, shall we say, fairly rigid in their approach sometimes, if we're going to generalize. And sometimes when I talk to them about this type of stuff, you also mentioned ritual, and I want to talk a little bit about that too. But I mentioned this type of stuff, and I get the Heisman, I get the, you know what, dude, I don't really do butterflies and rainbows and stones and gems, and I'm like, yeah, I get it, and this has weight. This is real. This isn't just you feeling things or thinking about things. This is changing your body chemistry. And that's a big deal when you talk about how you manage stress and burnout over the long haul, right? Because that law of diminishing returns, you can't outwork it. Right?
No.
So you mentioned rituals, and there's a lot of research right now on the power of ritual. There was an HBO article a couple months ago, maybe like 5 or 6 months ago now, about the power of rituals in teaming. Like when you use rituals on a team, changing how it feels to be on a team just by using simple, meeting rituals and stuff. We use a technique that we call ripples and joys, and we blatantly stole it from a former client, nonprofit company here in Denver. And the woman who ran that runs YMCA of Tucson right now. Venicia Kerr is her name. She's amazing. And she taught me about ripples and joys. Well, she taught Morag. And Morag said, I think we should do that at our team. And I said, I think that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. So what ripples and joys are, and we've talked about it here before, so I'll be brief. Ripples are business-oriented things. So we go around the table and everybody shares business-oriented thing. Hey, I heard from Johanna last week. I haven't heard from her in 2 years. She just called me out of the blue. It was awesome, right? Could be anything work-related. Joy is anything that brought you joy in your whole life that week. Because like you said, you can't leave your emotions at the door. You bring your whole self wherever you go, and it comes with you to work, and your work persona goes home with you too. So everybody goes around the table and they share a ripple, at least one, and a joy, at least one. If you got more, bring it. And we do our staff meetings every Friday, and sometimes they have to be really short because of our travel schedules and such. If we only have 15 minutes, that's the only thing we do. It has fundamentally changed the relationships of the people on the team. We know things about each other that we would not know because we're a distributed organization too, right? We don't have an office. We work out of our homes and travel. We have lived through marriages, divorces, medical events, ups, downs, right? Graduations, births, like all sorts of the events that make a life. And it's changed everything about the team. What are the rituals that you like, that you've used in your life, and that you teach to your coachees and your clients?
So very similar, right? So there's two that sort of stand out to me. The first is starting off every meeting with what we would call a community meeting. And I believe that is foundational because it was asking people to tell me how they were feeling. All right, so I just asked a simple question. How are you feeling? Well, fine is feelings inside not expressed. Right? So I would never accept that. I would say, okay, that's nice. And I would say that
one
acronym.
more time. Fine is
fine. Feelings inside not expressed.
Oh, that's gold.
Right? There's nobody who's is fine. That's not a feeling, right? So we would talk about what are your feelings, and as a leader, I'm listening, right? So if everybody's telling me that they're overwhelmed, they're tired, they're exhausted, I have to listen to that signal, right? Or if I have 5 people who are really, and I don't need any explanation, I just need to know how are you feeling, and you have to role model that yourself. Right. So as a leader, I would tell people, how was I feeling? And I actually have celiac disease, so I have an autoimmune disorder. And so there were some days where I would be coming in and I am not okay. Right. So I would need to let them know I don't have the brain capacity today because of what's going on in my body. So I'm not going to be as fully present. You just have to be honest. You have to be authentic. You have to really walk the talk. So there's that. I also did monthly joy connections where the only thing we did was something that was about joy, right? So Christmas time, we all baked together on Zoom from 5 different countries where we literally made the same recipe in our homes while on Zoom. It was kind of fun. Other days we did, other months we did different things. We tried to really connect it to something that mattered to the people on the team. And then regularly I would do what we called rosebud thorn.
Yep.
So what's the rose, the thing that's growing great? What's the bud that you really want to incubate? And what's the thorn that's really holding you back from doing your best work?
I love those. And it's funny. It's like, it makes me think of, when budgets get tight, the first thing we cut is recruiting and training, which is the exact wrong things to cut when budgets get tight. So when things get stressful, when the heat is high, the first thing that we kind of let go of is the human relational connectivity stuff. Like, we have too much pressing real work to do, so we're not going to waste time with our, rituals or whatever. Anna asked what it was called, and she called it Joys and Giggles, and I think we should do one called Joys and Giggles. And it's called Ripples and Joys. Ripples are the business-oriented, ripples the relationships over time. Joys is anything joyful. I love what you just said, Johanna, about just focusing on joy. Ruby does an exercise where she asks people in workshops, what's on their joy list? Like, just give me one thing off your joy list. And, we go with 18, 20 people in a room. You find out a lot about those people by talking about what's on their joy list.
And then the thing that's so important as a leader is to remember that. Right. So, and then circle back to that. Right. So it's not just enough to say it in the moment. It's to actually make it something that's sustainable, to show that you care, to demonstrate that you do, quite frankly, give a shit about the person that you're talking to.
I had a CEO that I was coaching one time, and he said, because, Sky Team, we're all about relationships. We wrote a couple books about it. This book right here, You, Me, We, Why We All Need a Friend at Work and How to Show Up as One. Makes a fine gift for anybody looking for gifts. He said to me, do I have to be friends with these people? I just want to come here. I just want to fucking do my job and I want to go home. And my response is, you don't have to do anything. Right? And as a coach, I'm never going to tell you what you can and can't do. I'm not going to tell you what you should do. You're a grown-ass adult. You make that decision. However, you may want to consider how things might be different if you do care about those people. If you do know them beyond how their cog fits into the machine.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what might be different for you if that were true? And that's a question I ask all the time. Okay, so let's say that were true. What might be different? You're not friends with anybody. What might be different? Doesn't sound very much fun to me, but you decide.
Yeah.
Connectivity is it's the glue, right? It's the thing, it reminds me of the old saying that we used to say, in HR, people are our greatest asset. But yeah, right? See, you even rolled your eyes. Because it was a thing you said, or it was a thing that showed up on a poster in a lobby somewhere as part of some corporate values exercise that got rolled out by marketing that nobody gave a shit about. Actually caring does make a difference. If the people on your team are your greatest asset, you care about them as human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it has to be joy and connection and connectivity can't just be transactional. Like, I have to do this because it has to have true depth and true meaning. There was a fantastic article on HBR, I think today, all about joy in the workplace, right? And actually, joy is one of Pfizer's foundational 4 values that I was privileged enough to actually work on implementing within the organization. But we had to make it real, and you have to model it yourself. You can't create joy for others if you've lost touch with what brings you joy, right? So teams watch you as a leader, right? They're watching how you show up. If you're running on fumes, if you're not doing something that brings you joy, they can feel it. And don't pretend that they can't, because they can.
100%. 100%. What advice do you have for leaders on teams where they just know the team is disconnected? They can feel the knot starting to unravel. What do you advise them to do first to help reset that?
I think the first thing is they have to look at themselves, right? So how are they feeling, right? And get really hyper honest with that, because a team that's disconnected is usually because the leader is also disconnected. Or if you're not seeing your team be motivated, there's probably something that you're signaling about your own motivation. And I was there, right? I was leading a team, and I was in that moment, right, where I was feeling disconnected and I was feeling demotivated. And it was a strain on my team. Right. And I had one of my team members say, "Hey, I'm not feeling that you're like 100% with us right now." And I'm like, "I'm not. I'm really not. I'm struggling." And that was a good conversation for them to tell me, right? And we had a lot of trust, and we were friends. We had been peers, and now I was the leader. And so having that conversation, role modeling, and being open about how you're feeling yourself. And it's hard, right? If you have lack of clarity, and in my case, I was feeling unclear about what should our goals be. So I had that lack of clarity, and I was I was projecting that onto my team, right? So you have to get really, really clear yourself. You have to make sure that you're energizing yourself. You can't lead if you're not doing that.
You know, Johanna, that requires vulnerability. And sometimes as a leader, especially the higher up the organizational food chain you move, being vulnerable doesn't come as easily. How do you help someone put the shield down?
Yeah. And that's a hard question, right? Because vulnerability means something different to everyone. You know, some people think they're being vulnerable, but really what they're doing is oversharing, right? So it's what is vulnerability? So let's actually first define that, and it's telling the story in a way that isn't going to then make the other person overwhelmed, right? So you can't just be like, everything is, I'm vulnerable here, and I'm going to tell you all about how everything is, how I feel. It's how do you talk about how you're feeling in a way that enables them to feel that they're not alone, but also doesn't create chaos, right?
Yeah.
So that's the pause that you have to really take as a leader and say, what am I intending in this conversation? When I'm being vulnerable, is it to show people that I can be a vulnerable leader and say, I don't know? You know, like if there's change happening as a leader managing through, uncertain times, it is okay to say to your people, I don't know what's happening, but I'm here with you, right? You might not have an answer, and you can say that. It's better to be clear and say, I don't have an answer, than try to make up an answer. People know that. They know when you're in that space. So just be honest.
You said clear, and it made me think of one of my favorite quotes from our Lord and Savior, Brene Brown. Clear is kind. Clear is kind.
And then the second thing is listen, and not just to the words, to everything that's underneath the words. Really listen. And I think a lot of leaders don't do this very well. And I was guilty of that. I'm probably still guilty of that. My 20-year-old daughter will tell you I don't listen. Right? She is totally. I'm not a good listener in her mind. But it is really about opening yourself up to just listen without trying to solve.
Oh, yes. You just ticked a big box in my mental list here. I was coaching a CFO one time, and she was a fixer. So someone would come in and she would pounce on the problem and start to solve it. And it took her years to realize that wasn't really going so well, because people would leave and they'd be like, I don't know what just happened in there. So she came up with a system that she uses. When someone comes in with a thing and they say the thing, she says, hold on, time out. Before I say anything, do you want me to fix it? Do you want me to coach you, or do you just need to vent? Because when she knows what her role is, she can play that part. And what you said about listening is so important. Ruby talks about, she calls it deep presence. Like when someone is talking to you, be there. Humans cannot multitask. I don't care what you say. The research shows you switch serial tasking really fast, but you cannot do two things at one time. And how many times have you been in a meeting in person or online where you can see it? If it's on Zoom, people think they can get away with stuff. dude, I can see your eyes. You're reading, right? Or you've got your phone and someone comes in to talk to you and they don't put it down. They're still just, scrolling and typing. And I'm like, you're devaluing the relationship. You are undermining your credibility as a leader. Being deeply present matters.
And it's not hard. It really isn't that hard to do. And that's what I think is so interesting about it. And we've all been in those situations. I mean, we've probably all done it, right? You're on a Zoom and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I'll just go off camera for a minute.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. We all know what you're doing. We all know that you're checking your phone.
You're doing
probably
something
on
that's
Facebook.
not here.
That's not here. So be present. And if you have to go off camera for a minute, if your daughter called from college with a disaster, just say it. It's okay. Say, hey, I need to step away for 5 minutes. Or if there's something that's going on. Yeah, people can handle. They can handle the truth.
Yeah. Despite what they said in the movie, you can't handle the truth. You can handle the truth. Johanna, this has been awesome. I want to give folks time to ask any questions that they might have, but while they're getting their thoughts together, if people want to learn more about you out on the worldwide interwebs, where do they go to find you? How do they connect with you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the best place to find me. So Johanna Danaher on LinkedIn. And also my website is anchor2aspire.com. And that's T-O, not the number 2. So anchor2aspire.com.
Awesome. And where should we go to learn any facts about lobsters that maybe we don't know? I'm kidding. You don't have to answer that question.
The American Lobster Association. I really don't know if that's a thing, but you have to go to vacation in Maine, in Pemaquid, Maine. There's an amazing little seafood restaurants, lots of them, but always, go find your way.
I love Pemaquid so much. Pemaquid Light is one of my favorite places on planet Earth. And there's a little restaurant right next door to it. So good. So good.
The Seagull Shop.
Yes. Awesome. Johanna, thank you. Thank you for being here today. This has been super fun. I've enjoyed this conversation a lot. And now, my friends, it is time to get into our end of show ritual that we now call Last Call, like at a bar. Last Call consists of 3 components: funny things, good feels, and our distributed cocktail. It should take about 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes tops. Funny things, random, dumb things from the internet that made Eric laugh this week. Funny thing number 1. It's a picture of a bunch of people on a bridge fighting with lightsabers. 911, what's your emergency? Yeah, I have a galactic civil war on a bridge. I'm sorry, what? That made me giggle because I'm a Star Wars nerd. This one made me giggle because I'm a dude, and I bet it makes Chuck giggle. Dudes will date a girl for like 6 years and have something like this as her contact photo. It's a picture of a woman brushing her teeth, looking at the person taking the picture like, the hell are you doing taking a picture of this? This is from the dad file here. This says, our 4-year-old's been running the house, so I called the only man who ever kept me in line. And it's a text with this guy and his dad. He asked his dad what he should do. Dad said, establish the dad voice early. When all hope is lost, it prevails. So yelling, no, very different. It's not about volume. It's about density. I used it once at a park when you ran toward the swings. Half the kids just stopped dead in their tracks. It felt like casting a spell. I would say the same thing. The same thing stands for mom voice. Mom voice is a legit thing. And I've seen that happen in real time many, many times. This one is just dumb. It's a sign that says self-cemetery, and the quote is, I thought self-checkout at Walmart was bad. This is the part of the show where I miss Lori's giggles. She stays on the mic and laughs when I tell my jokes. You guys are typing, you're laughing, and that's not translate to radio. Last but not least, my favorite funny thing this week, it's one of those demotivational posters. It's a serene scene of a beach, and it says, "This too shall pass," and then some other bullshit will come and take its place. It never fucking ends. Because sometimes...
So true.
There's Mariah. There
you
is.
go, Eric.
Thank you. All right, today's Good Feel story. You know what's happening. It's Steve. Everybody loves Dave. And my faith in humanity slightly restored. All right, last but not least, the distributed cocktail. This is called Carry Me Home. It is a riff on the Carry, with an I-E, Me Home cocktail. You're going to need a quarter pint of gin because it's been that kind of week. And we're making a pitcher of drinks here. In London, they host an annual wife carrying race. That's a real thing. You need a pint of lemonade. Racers must carry their partners, male or female, weighing up to 110 pounds. Or actually, at least 110 pounds. My bad. Up and down a tall, grassy hill. If you don't weigh 110 pounds, they will attach a rucksack filled with flour to make up the difference. You'll need a little bit of orange juice. This couple from Finland, Timu and Iata, they were crowned the winners. They made it up and down the hill in 1 minute and 45 seconds, and you can see them in this photo. That was the carry position that they adapted. She is on his shoulders, but she is face down on his shoulders, which, I don't know, maybe that helps their drag coefficient. I'm not sure how that works. You need a quarter pint of vodka. My favorite quote from this literal news story was, "You don't have to carry your own wife. It could be someone else's, or mate, or girlfriend, boyfriend, sister, brother, whatever. They should ideally weigh less than you do," is what they said. And that, my friends, made me giggle. I am grateful for you. Gratitude for you. Gratitude for Johanna. Thanks for being here with us today. We are looking forward to getting back together in a couple of weeks. Have great weeks, everybody. Go have some dinner.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you had a good time and learned a thing or two at today's happy hour, please share it with your friends. If you want to join our tribe, head on over to skyeteam.cloud/TCB or email us at info@skyeteam.com. That's SKYE team.com. Thanks again, and remember, you've always got friends at the Corporate Bartender.